Welcome, Patriots, to this episode of Common Sense for America. I am Bruce Rutherford, your host and commentator, coming to you as usual from the beautiful Westwood Golf Club in Houston, Texas. As I speak, we are 3 days from the 2024 presidential election day. This has been one of the most divisive elections in modern history, and according to Gallup's latest polling, American trust in our electoral system has hit historic lows. Just 27% of Americans say they have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in our election process. Think about that. Nearly 3/4 of your fellow citizens have lost faith in the very foundation of our democracy. Even families are arguing at home over their choices for president. Husbands and wives are not speaking about it, and they're not even watching the news together. A recent Pew Research study tells us that 45% of Americans have stopped talking to someone about political issues due to disagreements. How many of you have experienced this in your own family? You know, when people tell me this division is unprecedented, I remind them of something remarkable. Our nation was born at a time when only 1/3 of the population supported independence. 1/3 didn't care either way, and 1/3 wanted to stay with the British monarchy. According to historical records from the Continental Congress, winning the Revolutionary War wasn't just a military miracle. It was a miracle of political unity in the face of stark division. George Washington, the most popular figure in America, could have declared himself king or even dictator. Instead, he did something extraordinary. He defined the role of the president through restraint and wisdom. National archives tell us he remains the only president in history to win unanimous electoral college victories. All 69 electoral votes, not once but twice. Historians believe he could probably have done it a third time if he had wanted to run. Now, during his second term, Washington warned us about something we're seeing play out today. In his farewell address, and I encourage every American to read this document, he specifically cautioned against the formation of political parties. He believed they would lead to exactly what we are experiencing now: division, disharmony, and loss of national purpose and national focus. By 1796, we saw exactly what Washington feared. Two political parties emerged: the Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, and the Federalist Party, led by John Adams and Alexander Hamilton. Now, you might think these men, who worked together to write both the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, would have run clean campaigns. Well, you'd be wrong. The Library of Congress archives show that newspapers controlled by each party printed what we now call fake news, uncorroborated rumors, and outright lies about both candidates. Sound familiar? According to a recent Pew Research data, 64% of Americans say they can't tell the difference between good journalism and false information. Now, the election results of that 1796 election were stunning. Adams won in the Electoral College by just 1 vote more than required. Jefferson became vice president because he received the second most votes. Imagine that today, having the winner and the runner-up serve together in the executive branch. Then came the election of 1800. Now, according to official records, Jefferson and Aaron Burr each received 73 electoral votes. Aaron Burr was Jefferson's running mate, supposed to be vice president. This wasn't just close, it was a perfect tie for the presidency. Burr's betrayal of Jefferson, claiming his own right to be president, led to our first major constitutional crisis. Don't worry, the 12th Amendment of 1804 fixed this. Still, Alexander Hamilton at that time, despite his deep disagreements with Jefferson politically, made a crucial choice. His personal letters, preserved in the Library of Congress, show that he believed Jefferson was the lesser of two evils. The House of Representatives ultimately chose Jefferson as president, with Burr as vice president. But the story doesn't end there. According to historical records, Hamilton continued his opposition to Burr in New York, where Burr was trying to win yet another office. And that led to the famous duel in Weehawken, New Jersey. Hamilton, known to be an expert marksman, deliberately fired into the air. but Burr took deadly aim. Political division had turned into personal vengeance, costing Hamilton his life. Now fast forward to what many consider to be our nation's darkest hour. The election of Abraham Lincoln triggered the Civil War. Electoral records show that Lincoln won in 1860 with just 39.8% of the popular vote in a four-way race. Think about that. Less than 40% of the voters chose the man who would go on to preserve our Union. Some historians argue that any Republican victory in the presidential campaign, regardless of the candidate, would have resulted in the Civil War. Others say the Civil War was inevitable in any event. It took the political and wartime presidential genius of Lincoln and the military genius of Grant to win the war and save the nation. Ultimately, Lincoln paid for this victory with his life. Now let's jump to 1960, the Kennedy-Nixon election. According to Federal Election Commission data, Kennedy won by just 112,827 votes nationally, a margin of 0.17%. That's about the population of a small city, determining who would lead what was then a nation of 180 million people. Smithsonian Records tells us that something fascinating about that election. People who listened to the first Kennedy-Nixon debate on the radio thought Nixon won. Those who watched the television favored Kennedy. Now, how many times a day do we see different media outlets telling completely different stories about the same event? Kennedy was the more photogenic of the two. Nixon had a cold, all of that. Still, you got two different outcomes from the same debate. Speaking of media trust, recent Gallup polling shows just 34% of Americans trust mass media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. That's one of the lowest numbers in polling history. So, how do we fix this? We need uniform rules for federal elections. Notice I said federal. It's across all states. Currently, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, we have 50 different sets of election rules. Let me outline 5 crucial changes that we need. We need to ensure only eligible citizens can vote. We need primarily in-person voting with strict one person, one vote enforcement. We must require proper identification, whether it's a driver's license, a passport, or other government-issued ID. Absentee ballots need the same verification with clear deadlines. We must end ballot harvesting. No one should be delivering votes for another person. Now, recent polling from the Pew Research Center, which I mentioned above, shows 90% of Americans support requiring all voters to show government-issue photo identification to vote. That's not partisan, that's just common sense. The presidential election is only 3 days away. What happens when the polls close? Will we see a clear winner acknowledged, or will we face more division and discord? Whatever happens, remember this: our nation has survived deeper divisions than this before. From the Revolution through the Civil War, from disputed elections to assassination attempts, America's democracy has proven remarkably resilient. Please discuss these ideas with your friends and colleagues. Listen to their views. Our nation's healing starts with each of you. Share your thoughts with us on our website, and we would love hearing from you. And then please join us next time when we discuss the Federal Emergency Management Administration. Until then, God bless you, and God bless America.